Thank you everyone for joining, and welcome to the Accelerant Thought Leadership Series webinar. And today we will be joined by guest speakers from the Perot Museum in Dallas, Texas, and the University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio, and they're going to present their forecasting process within their organizations, as well as share their experiences and lessons learned along the way. My name is Joanne Brunn. I'm the CEO of Accelerant, and I'll be your moderator today. So in a minute, I'll be introducing our guest speakers, but first I want to go through our agenda and cover a few webinar tips. So I'll start the presentation with a quick overview of Accelerant and why we're including this important topic in our Thought Leadership Series. I will start I'll introduce our speakers to give us some background on their organizations. Then we'll dive right into the main presentation. Our speakers will cover what their goals were with their forecasting process, the practical aspects of how they are forecasting today, and then we'll share the benefits and outcomes they have seen. Then I'll present a brief wrap-up, and we'll answer any questions that came in during the webinar, time permitting. And if we don't get to those today, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So all of your lines are muted. If you'd like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the question box on your GoToWebinar panel. And as I said, if we don't get to your questions today, we will certainly follow up with you afterwards. So I'd like to briefly introduce you to Accelerant and share a bit on why we're hosting today's webinar. Accelerant's cloud-based budgeting, forecasting, reporting solution was created to facilitate collaborative budgeting to help organizations achieve a more accurate final budget and ongoing forecast that is aligned to your strategic plan. And we believe that budgeting and forecasting represents an opportunity to engage your employees and get their best thinking on how to bring your organization's strategy to life. And we think that the Perot Museum and the University of Findlay are excellent examples of this philosophy in action. So without further ado, let's get into the details of the presentation. So first, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker from the Perot Museum of Nature and Science, Sally Berven. She joined Perot Museum as the Chief Financial Officer in December of 2014. She was most recently the Vice President of Finance for the Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas, and when she was responsible for all aspects of financial accounting for the business and the officer reporting to the Endowment Board. Prior to that role, she served as the Chief Administrative Director of the Dallas Children's Theater, where she was the Senior Officer reporting to the board for all financial and accounting matters. Prior to joining the not-for-profit sector, Sally was the co-owner of a successful construction business, was a registered financial advisor and broker to private clients, and worked as a buyer for major retail firms. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Wharton School of Business and an MBA in Finance from the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So just to start off, would you tell us a bit about the Perot Museum? I have some images from the museum on the screen, a bit about its history and its mission, some of the typical exhibits and the types of programs and events that you put on.
Sure. The Perot Museum is a 5-year-old institution, and it was formed for the merger of 3 smaller museums who had been in the Dallas area. So what we saw was the merger and trying to get all of those systems together. We have about 850,000 people come through every year, our 180,000 square foot facility. 250,000 of those are school children on field trips. We also do a large amount of outreach in the area. We have a theater that's showing movies all during the day. We have a cafe. We have a store. We have a large operation for parking because we're downtown. We're located in downtown Dallas. And we have traveling exhibits that come through. We have 2 or 3 a year. And so we have lots of different lines of business programs, fund development in terms of contributions, and coordinating all of those lines of business and the budget managers with different lines of experience. Our operating budget is about $23 million a year.
Okay, thank you so much, Sally. So now let me move on and introduce our guest speaker from the University of Findlay. Ann Wells joined the University of Findlay as an accounts receivable manager 6 years ago. She's currently the Director of Finance and Business Planning in charge of operating and long-term budgeting. Previously, she worked in the banking industry as an Assistant Vice President with the Old Fort Banking Company and a Financial Center Manager with the Huntington National Bank. And she's a graduate of the University of Findlay with a Bachelor's in Finance and an MBA in Organizational Leadership. So welcome, Anne.
Thanks, Joanne.
So would you tell us a bit about the University of Findlay, its history and mission, size, schools, degrees, and any unusual programs? Because I know you have a few.
Yeah, sure. So we have about a 4,000 person student count. 2,500 of those would be undergraduate and 1,500 graduate. In our undergraduate programs, our unique programs include English equestrian, Western equestrian, and pre-vet animal science. So those are some unique undergraduate programs that we offer. We also offer a direct admit pharmacy, physical therapy, and OT, which start as undergraduate and then transition into graduate. So on our graduate side, we have 1,500 students. And as I mentioned, we have master's degrees and doctorate degrees. So quite an array there. We're set up as 6 different colleges, so depending on the major. Our operating budget is about $83 million, and we are a residential campus, so we do have dorms on campus. We also operate, as I mentioned, with those majors, we operate 2 fully functional farms and a veterinary clinic. So that's a big part of our operations. And also another auxiliary service line of business that we do is All Hazards Training Center. So environmental safety, health and occupational safety, they focus on that. And so that ties in well with our majors that we have there. We have a museum on campus, so the largest museum of children's illustrations. So lots of illustrators will donate their work to this museum. That's the only one of its kind in the country, so it's very unique to us. So we also do a lot of fundraising and have an endowment. So that's a little bit about the University of Findlay.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. All right, so let's, just to get everyone on the same page with definitions, because I know people call budgeting, forecasting, projections, different things in their organization. Let's start with you, Sally. What would you say are the main differences between budgeting, forecasting, and projections?
Budgeting for us is what we're trying to do in the next year by month. The forecasting that we're doing is taking the actuals for that for the year of the budget and the actuals and melding them together. And then the projections is really forward-looking, going out several years.
Okay, and in terms of the level of detail you're doing in those 3, is it all at the GL account level, or you're looking at higher levels depending upon how far out you're going?
The further out we go, I would say we don't look so much at the GL level. For the budgeting process, it's very detailed by GL by month, and then and that's what we do for the forecast. The projections on the expense side, I really look at the summaries and do percentages for those, but I don't go down to the GL level.
Okay, thank you. So, Anne, what about on your side, budgeting, forecasting, and projections? What would be your definitions of those?
Very similar. We do budgeting once per year at the beginning, prior to our fiscal year starting. And then as soon as our fiscal year starts, the first month we would reforecast using a combination of actuals. So month 1 would be 1 month plus 11 months of budget for our forecasting. And we really only look 12 months at a time. And then for projections, anything beyond 1 year would be a long range projection.
Okay, and the long-range projections, is that something I think that's new to your university, or have you been doing that on some basis for a while? We talked a little bit about how things are changing a bit.
It's very much new to us. I think everyone is always asked for a 5-year projection, but we all know, the quality behind that sometimes is not there. And I think with what we're doing, we're actually putting some quality information and data-driven decisions behind that. So it's very much different. Our board is asked for it, our banks ask for it, just like everyone else. But the approach that we're taking is more quality data that we have.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sally.
I was just going to say I was just going to say I would agree with that, and I think we're getting more requests from the board and financial partners to have a more realistic, forward-looking estimate or projection, and we do have much more quality. I think really having a 3-year projection becomes much easier and much higher quality and realistic, but going to 5, you're making some assumptions. But yes, there is more of a demand for that.
Okay. All right, so we're going to actually spend some time on the practical aspects of the consideration points for forecasting. We'll talk about what are the overall goals, so what are you trying to accomplish with a forecast, and who gets involved. So there may be different people involved in budgeting versus forecasting. How often does the forecast need to be looked at and updated? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it as needed? So we'll hear 2 different approaches on that. And then the approach that works best for what you're trying to accomplish, whether you're merging actuals with the budget and holding the totals the same as the budget, or whether you're merging those numbers and then adjusting your annual total based upon how the actuals have come in, or is there some combination of the 2? And then finally, the types of reporting that's needed to assist in that forecasting process. So let's first start with a discussion of the top challenges to the forecasting process and the goals that are trying to be accomplished. So Sally, if we start with you, can you give us a little bit of insight into how your budgeting and forecasting process worked prior to using a dedicated software solution?
Sure. When I was first here about 4 years ago, it was just an Excel-based system that we used. It wasn't even a system, it was just Excel. And it was all linked spreadsheets, and each budget manager was responsible for their Excel spreadsheet. And the department here, the accounting department, we would try to link them up. And it was always broken links. And after the budget due date that we had, it took quite some time to even get an estimate of where the budget would be. And we always had broken links. So it was not efficient in terms of the time that people spent on it and the system, and we really weren't getting an accurate budget.
And what is your fiscal year?
We start October 1st through September 30th.
Okay. And I think you mentioned it used to take like 3 to 4 weeks to close and get accurate numbers out of the system.
Yes, because we had so many broken links and things that were not completed. We really couldn't tell who had finished until we rolled it up and physically, looked at each spreadsheet and each link. We had to make sure that everyone was done. There was no status. And to give you an idea, we just closed our budget draft for FY19 that would start October 1st of this year, and we closed it, and on Monday evening at 5:30, and we had a roll up by 5:45 that evening after initializing. So it was really inefficient, and we were just using Excel and trying to make it something that it wasn't.
Okay, so what was it that you were looking for or looking to do when you thought about, I really need to get something in the hands of my budget managers so they could budget and forecast more easily?
we needed something that was easy for people to use. And with a nonprofit museum, we have some people who budgeting and financials is really not their expertise. We have some people who are just wonderful at handling the school children and teaching them the science that we have here. So coming in and doing a budget's not their, that's not where they shine. So we needed something that we could relate to and not just be a very technical Excel spreadsheet. So we were looking for ease of use for each budget manager.
Sure. Okay. And what about from your side? What were you trying to solve, or from the board's perspective, what were they looking for?
They were looking for information, number one, that was accurate, that really, tied to our accounting system, and that we accomplished. They were looking for timely reports. We were not able to really close the books and get everything completed from the accounting system and into budgeting system or into these spreadsheets. So we needed timeliness and accurate and ease of use for the budget managers.
Okay. Thank you, Sally. So, Anne, I presume that you've had many of the same challenges with Excel. I'm sure that people on the phone who use Excel can relate to those. So I'd like to focus on your question on what was important to University of Findlay and looking for a budgeting and forecasting solution.
Yeah, for us, we have some of the similar things that Sally mentioned, but we didn't, our approach previously was that we didn't actually solicit any, what Sally described, we didn't even do. So it was a very high level centralized budgeting, and that came from, years of having the same person over finance. So we had some turnover, which then brought in some fresh ideas, and kind of gave the campus community an opportunity to say, hey, we want to do things differently. One of the things that we do here is we really do put a strong emphasis on shared governance. So they want to make decisions with us, and the way we had been doing budgeting didn't allow for that. It was a very much kind of a squeaky wheel, whoever, gets the attention there, and we would carry forward balances from one year to the next, and no one was really required to zero base a budget from one year to the next. So the shared governance is the biggest reason that we went to budget pack, and so that was that we could get this information out to the correct people, because some of them had never seen it before. Others were asking for it. So it's been a great process. We also, the transparency piece, they want to know how all the tuition dollars are being spent. And everyone deserves to know that information. So getting that information out to the non-financial audience, as Sally mentioned, was huge for us. And Budget Pack is very much set up in a way for a non-financial audience, and that's what we were looking for, is taking them from nothing to something, but not putting them in shock at the same time. So one of the came out of Budget Pack that we didn't know we knew we needed, but didn't know we could use it so much, was the access to the raw data. So after the budgeting process, our ability to get just raw data and do what we want with it in a matter of seconds was an added benefit.
Okay, thank you. And you told kind of an interesting story when we chatted before, that your new vice president came from a corporate environment and they didn't quite understand the dynamics or the people dynamics of higher ed. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's been an interesting road on both sides. I've learned from him, and he's learned from us. When he comes in, every cost center manager in a corporate environment, that's really their sole purpose, is to manage expenses and get an ROI and all those things. On a corporate environment, that's responsibility number one, because it means your profit. And so he came in with the expectations that when he's speaking to, even at a dean level, the highest level in academics, that they have that same mentality of, I'm here to, be efficient, be make the most out of my dollar, save money. That's not education. Education, they're here to teach what their passion is. Budgeting is just a job responsibility part of it. And most of them are not, nor should they be, that great at it. So getting him brought over, and it also raised the level. It's nice to have an expectation for people that in those positions you are responsible for a somewhat sophisticated level of budgeting. So that's been an interesting transition for us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Sally, I presume, you kind of suggested it's the same on your side because you do have those people who are running the camps and the children's program, and they're not financial people either.
Correct. They're not, and we really need something that was very easy to use, and that's what I kind of call it, without using another company's name, I call it the TurboTax of budgeting, and that's how I explained it to people. And it's going to ask you questions and things of, that's how you did your budget, and that was very comforting for people who are not used to that. So it's very user-friendly that way.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have just a couple of polls before we get into the who is involved on the Perot side. On the Findlay side, we like to understand what type of model you're all using today. So for the first poll, it's just based on your budgeting process. The next poll will cover your forecasting. So from your budgeting process, is it completely decentralized? Department heads provide input. Is some combination? It's completely centralized, or you're not doing budgeting. So let me run that poll now and launch it. And you should all be able to see that on your screens. I'll just wait a bit, and I'll run both of them, and then we'll talk about the responses. We'll just give it a little bit more. And one more. There's a clear winner. Sally and Ann, you can probably guess what that is. But let me, keeps changing. All right, let me give you one more. All right, let me close that. And let me just share that quickly so you can all see that 10% of you completely decentralized, 83% a combination. There's probably some top-down information coming down, and then 7% of you are completely centralized. Okay, so let's compare that to the next poll. Oops, too far. Here we go, which is the forecasting poll. So same question. How centralized or decentralized is your forecasting process today? Completely decentralized, a combination, completely centralized, or not doing forecasting. And this is completely different, as you'll see when people stop putting their responses in, as we suspected. All right, let me give it a few more seconds. So we've got, keeps changing. But basically, here we go, 32, 25. All right, I'm going to close that and share it. So from a forecasting side, there's only 4% of you that are completely decentralized. There was 10% of you on the budgeting side. The combination decentralized and centralized for forecasting, 39% on the forecasting, 83% on the budgeting side. Completely centralized, 32% on the forecasting side, 7% was budgeting, and there's 25% of you who are not doing forecasting at all. So Sally or Ann, do you have any comments on kind of the difference between budgeting and forecasting that you see from the audience?
Other than the fact that I would agree with those results, we do probably a combination of decentralized and centralized budgeting, and we then take over complete control of forecasting. So that's how we approach that process.
Right, I would agree. We're at the Perot Museum, our budget process is is a combination, and then forecasting, it is 100% finance controls.
Mm-hmm. So, and I suspect that it would be different. Usually budgeting is the one that's pushed out all the way into the organization, and forecasting, there's some combination based upon who needs to get involved and when and why. So let's get back to our presentation, and let's get into the details of that. So who is involved? So let's look at that. So starting first with Perot, the graphic shows, this graphic on the right, shows a portion of their hierarchy. The black font notes kind of the base units or departments, typically where the budget or the data resides. And the blue are what we call in budget pack language the roll-up units or the parent units. So for example, school tours here has a 9 departments below it that they're responsible for reviewing and approving, whether that be in the budget side or forecasting side, depending upon how that is set up. But this just gives, and this is just a snapshot of that hierarchy. So Sally, let's just start with how many people overall are involved in your process?
I would say we have at least 50 people involved in our budget process. If they're a manager of just one program, then they are a budget manager and a part of that process that rolls up to their supervisor. So it really matters with their responsibility. We don't mind having somebody with really a small dollar amount being a budget manager, because we want them to own that and then grow within the organization and learn how to do that and be a part of all the trainings and the budget meetings. So it's very collaborative. It's really changed from 4 years ago with the link spreadsheet saying, someone kind of giving them very direct orders of how to do it. So we really encourage them with this process to talk to their manager and really come up with ideas and put it into budget pack with numbers and really use the whole budget pack with the notes and everything.
Mm-hmm. So those 50 budget managers, they might be responsible for more than one of these departments or units here, correct?
Correct. You could have people like when you see school tours, you could have those in the gray owned by different people. And then the school tours, that person who's responsible for that could also be responsible for community engagement as well. So,
Okay, so they get a little bit of kind of a depth of information about Perot Museum and not just necessarily isolated to one area.
Correct. So we have so many programs that we have in the building and outreach. That's really what you're looking at on that screen that's broken down. And so those owners of that budget really know their business and how to deliver it. And so they have to kind of work on how to get it into this system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so just talk a little bit about the timing that you give them. You talked about giving them about 2 weeks to put in their expenses and that, and you had a good story around that.
Well, what we do, first of all, is we start with the revenue piece. We put everybody together. We have meetings about, attendance and the exhibits that we're having. And we have some of the data people who are looking at our attendance patterns. And so we come up with revenue. We open up Budget Pack for 2 weeks, and people put in their revenue based upon the conversations and the data of attendance and how that flows through. Because we have a certain percentage, people going to the theater that come through. So we always give people 2 weeks because we're afraid if someone's on vacation that they won't get it done. So we always have a 2-week window where it's open. So revenues go in, and then we close Budget Pack. And then based upon the revenues, I give the senior C-suite a dollar amount that they cannot exceed. So for expenses. So then we open up Budget Pack again, and expenses are loaded in. And if programs is overexpensed, then the higher level manager at the C-suite has to allocate those dollars between programs because we're just allocating the resources. So I really push that back on people because I think it really helps them manage their business. And I think the story that you're talking about is when they come back to me and say, I need more money. I said, we have already agreed to the revenues, and everybody felt very comfortable. And I can balance the budget in about 10 minutes, right? It would be a mathematical exercise. I'm asking you to balance it really based upon the business needs. How would you allocate your resources between the different programs that you have or the different movies you're going to show? So I really push it back on them.
Mm-hmm. That was the story, that it's so easy to just do this and essentially in a vacuum. I'm going to allocate this based on history, and that's that. You have no input and you'll like it. So, by giving them a choice, obviously, as you're doing it, they're really now invested in taking ownership because they're part of the process. Even if they don't get everything that they want, they've had a say.
Correct. And then those budget managers are going up to the person who's in charge of all programs and really pitching for their program. This program is worth keeping because, we reach so many people, and the other person saying, well, this program's worth so much and I need the money, but it doesn't serve as many people. So then that C-suite manager is talking to them and they're figuring out how to best allocate resources. It is painful at times, but the conversations are happening, and that's the important part.
Mm-hmm. And one other piece that you had mentioned is, I think this has to do with having good data over the years, that you actually use the trends of the last 3 years as the basis for the starting point for those revenue numbers.
Correct. We look, since we're so attendance driven and earned revenue driven, the average attendance by month for the last 3 years is our starting. And then we're very much like a retail organization where we're looking at how many Saturdays we have, where the holidays are falling, where the school holidays are, their holiday time, if they're off 1 week in the area for vacation. So we are very driven that way and data driven for that to create the revenues.
Mm-hmm. And is there any situation where they have, where your budget managers can come up with a different idea? So, if we did this, we could, get more money in the door. If we did this, we could save some money. Do you have is that part of the discussions as well?
Yes, it is. After we close the revenues, after 2 weeks that people have it, every roll-up unit that you see there, like the school tours or community engagement, that person meets with the finance team and they tell us what's going on. We have increased this month because of that event. We know that we know, for instance, that the school schedule changed, so we're able to add a week of camp because winter break is longer this year. So those camp revenues are going to go up. So our marketing expenses are going to go up because we're going to be having an extra week of camp. So we talk about the numbers. So we do that with them after revenues are in, and then again after expenses have been put in, and we're looking at the whole picture.
Okay. Thank you. So let's move on to Anne and the University of Findlay, which has a different approach. So on the right is a sort of a snapshot of a portion of their hierarchy. And for example, you'll see here the Academic Affairs Division consists of a number of different departments, which was similar to what we saw with Perot Museum, but then they also have general or roll-up areas reporting up into them, whether that's online, farms, or the various colleges. So they tend to have a sort of a more leveled hierarchy than Perot, just because of their particular needs. So, and just to start up, how many users are involved in your overall process?
I think about 75. I think we have 75 budget managers.
Okay. All right. And so talk a little bit about that, how your budgets are done first, and then how your forecast, because you talked about that's more handled centrally by finance, but you do in fact involve your department heads in that process, even though it's, quote unquote, centralized.
Right. So yeah, we let them develop their own expense budgets every year on a monthly basis. So they really focus on expenses, and even at that, they're focusing on non-headcount expenses, so discretionary expenses that they have control over. That's what our budget managers would look at. They use BudgetPack. They mainly use it for their actual 2 budgets throughout the year. So they'll log in and pull a report for month to date or just 1 month at a time, depending on what they're looking at. One of the unique things we have is sometimes we hold budget in one cost center and we allow the actuals to go into 10 different cost centers. So by having a roll-up area, it allows them the freedom to have the budget, but spend the actuals in the different places, basically doing an allocation themselves. So it's very hard when you're talking about part-time adjunct staff to assign a budget to a cost center where you're not sure what you'll need the next year. So the roll-up feature is very nice for that. It allows us to kind of hold a central budget and then give the autonomy for the the colleges to spend it as they need, but they can still track it. So that's huge. We do have a centralized revenue model, so we manage most of the revenue at a very high, probably at the vice presidential level. But we do have a farm, and they do bring in income, so we'll solicit information from our farm manager as to what he sees changing. We are actually moving to a responsibility-centered management approach, so every cost center will be assigned revenue or an allocation thereof revenue. So that will be very different for our cost center managers to now be in charge of revenue too, but they are. So I think that kind of covers how we handle things. But on the forecasting level, we most definitely keep that in-house. Being that they've just now gotten access to information, it's easier for them to communicate verbally what's going on than to put that into numbers. So.
Right. Okay. And there's not a lot really, I don't say a lot that's really changing. You talked about that your forecast really happens at the front end of the year, and there's not too many moving parts on the revenue side that would happen throughout the year.
That's correct. And I think that's one of the biggest things in higher ed, at least for us, is we have what we call makeup. We have zero makeup speed. So if we don't bring in that fall class, because we're a traditional private institution, if we don't bring in our fall class, we cannot make that up for the rest of the year. So it's very important that we have pretty immediate access to forecasting to say, okay, here's our fall revenue. What does that mean for the rest of the year? And then adjust from there. So I think most institutions are like that. You're a one-time at the beginning of the first month or whenever that is, and if you don't hit that, you're done. Or you're good. Either way, you can do planning for the positive as well. So.
Okay. So that's a good segue to the different frequencies. So both of you have different frequencies for when you update your forecast. And since Anne, you started talking about that, if you could talk first about that, you do more of that on-call forecast. You can explain what that timing is and why.
Yeah, so we do ours definitely after the first month ends, the first month of our fiscal year. So our fiscal year is August. Classes start mid-August. So by the end of August, we have 50% of our revenue collected for the entire year. And then, so we will do a very thorough forecast August 31st. And after that, as most people know, our revenue does not change from August to December. So there's no sense in us reforecasting again until we have another big revenue period. So we actually do have one in between, but for simplicity, we only forecast when we have significant revenue periods. So August, October, January, March, and then in summer. So we found the exercise to be too tedious from our point of view, not the system point of view, to do it any more frequently, and we weren't gaining anything out of it. So.
And you talked about that the things that could impact that revenue is students matriculating faster than expected or changes in the international students.
Correct.
Things like that.
So all those factors, those external factors that everyone's kind of fighting with, can significantly impact the current and then the future. So.
Okay. But now that you said you're seeing like 12 months at a whole, not just month by month, you can sort of see that in advance before it happens and hits and be able to do something presumably about it before it gets to that point.
example of what we've done this year is our international population dropped off significantly. So in the past, we would have just based our decision on what we brought in August, but we were able to put all 12 months up there and say, you know what, they're dropping off faster than they were last year. So the matriculation out is not going to be the same. We use, if we use the as last year spreading, it would have not provided us which we've always done as last year spreading. But when we put it up and actually looked at it this year and said, you know what, that doesn't make sense for what we're seeing, we wouldn't have been able to properly forecast that out if we would have always used what we did. So.
Okay. Thank you. And Sally, you do things a bit differently. You do things on a monthly basis. Could you talk about that, your process?
Sure. We do update our forecast every month, and are very different than the university. Our revenues, the number of attendees that we have, being such an earned revenue model, that's very important to us. So we're always tracking that and the average ticket price coming in. So we do update that every month. And we always are looking at the trailing 12 months for us. So that's always something that people are looking at. We're telling people that that is the most accurate snapshot of a year for you, because we really have seasons as well, and summer season and holiday season, and when school starts, things are a little slower for us. So we want to get a whole season of actuals in there at all times that people can be looking at. So that's very important to us. And we do have people, when we're doing the budget, we update it, that when we close the month in the accounting system, we import very quickly into Budget Pack the entire month. And we let people know when that is in. It's around the 15th of the month or the 14th of the month after we close. So it would be in June 14th for May. And we let everybody know, and they log into Budget Pack, and then they print out a spreadsheet of their budget for that month, and they give us variance notes. They were supposed to report back to us if they have large variances over a certain percentage amount and a certain dollar amount. And they let us know if it's timing or if it's permanent one on the expense side or on the revenue side. So if our membership department has changed a mailing of something, they let us know then. But we're always having that 12-month look at the past 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you did mention, we talk to folks and they say, my people they're not used to monthly budgets, I guess, and your people weren't either. And Sally, you even said that there's a few that still struggle with giving you monthly numbers instead of just an annual number. Correct. We do, especially someone who's new to the organization. They're like, oh, I just give, an annual number. And we don't do that because it really doesn't give you an accurate report. So the minimum that they can go down to is quarterly. We really like them to use the spreading feature. I said, if you're new and you don't know, then you have to spread it like they did last year if you're new to this department, because that's your best and accurate way to see what the expenses are going to be. But yes, they cannot just put one big number in there at that last, the 12th month of the fiscal year. We don't do that because you're really not getting an accurate picture of where you are during the other months. So, but we have big reporting times quarterly. So as long as they put a fourth of it in the quarter, that is the most that we'll kind of give on that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of approaches. So there's two kind of fundamental methods for forecasting. You merge your actuals in the budget or the actuals in the current forecast, and you keep the totals the same as the budget. So for the first method, if actuals came in higher, it would reduce your budget or forecast for the rest of the year to keep that total, example, for $100 for travel the same. The second method is you merging the actuals and budget or forecast, and then you adjust the totals based upon actuals. So if actuals came in $50 higher, now my budget or forecast for the travel line would be $150, not $100. So that's kind of two kind of classic approaches to forecasting. So organizations can use that result as sort of a guide, where are we headed? they can maybe just say, you know what, I know more information than that. I'm going to put a brand new total in, or they can do a combination of all of them. So this graphic right here on the screen just shows in Budget Pack where the first 3 months, January, February, March, in this fiscal year approach are actual, so they can't be changed. And they've been merged with the remaining 9 months of the budget or previous forecast. And so the user can adjust either the monthly numbers or the total. That's the approach. So Sally, which is the approach or approaches that you use in forecasting?
We change the total. So the year-to-date total would change. It would have the actuals plus the future month's budgeted numbers. And we take that information and we look at the variances and then start asking questions, you know, why is this up, or more importantly, why is this one down? And then we start to really kind of talk to that manager and figure out what the issue is. But we change the total.
You change it. Okay. And you had said your CEO has a strategic initiative document that everyone is aware of through a staff meeting, and the numbers as well. So their goal is to support sort of that end game that they have to come in.
Yes.
The fiscal responsibility is really important to your organization.
It is. We have had a CEO here for a year, and we have some new strategic initiatives that we're working towards on top of our base business. And everybody, part of their review is supporting their objectives for the year that they want to accomplish. All have to support the strategic initiatives of the CEO, and one of those is fiscal responsibility. So everyone is in tune to that, but it comes from the top down.
Mm-hmm. And there's different ways to sort of approach a forecast, and how do you deal with, certain expenses. And some of our clients, the goal is to reduce the contingency funds. So they want to be closely budgeting or forecasting enough that people are really aware of what's about to happen, and they want to keep those contingency funds to a minimum. You and Perot have a different philosophy. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Our contingency funds we have set aside for our building. We have a lot of capital expenditures, and we keep this building set aside. And we know that things are going to come about in 5 years and 3 years and what we're going to do. So we set aside every year, and we budget to have a surplus so that we can add to those contingency funds. That's what we try to do every year, so that we're supporting our IT, our building, and our exhibits. So it's very important to this organization to really have contingency funds or reserves in order for our big projects.
Okay, thank you. And Anne, you do it a little bit differently. You do a combination of both. You keep some totals the same and adjust others based on actuals. Could you explain how that works?
So for the University of Findlay, we will adjust the totals for revenue. So we want to see what it forecasts at the end to be. But for expenses, we hold the totals the same and force those backwards. So we definitely do a combination of both of the two, and I think that comes from our model of centralized revenue planning, that the budget holders are really only in control of their expenses. They are not necessarily we are tuition dependent, so 99% of our revenue comes in from tuition. They're, as budget owners, only responsible for 1% of revenue. So that's why we do ours that way, is they're more in control of expenses, and they need to be responsible to hold themselves to an expense budget. If they can come up with revenue, that's great too, but being tuition dependent, that's if an enrollment period, that's hard to be within their control as a college professor of biology. So we really focus on the expenses with our budget managers.
Okay, and that kind of easily segues to the reporting needs. And let's stick with you. So even though what you just talked about, that it's more centralized revenue, but department heads do look at their budget versus actuals to see how they're trending. What do they? This report shows budget versus forecast. It could easily show budget versus actuals. So what is it that your budget managers are looking for reporting on a monthly basis to help them manage those expenses?
I think I talked a little bit about our part-time adjunct faculty. So that they're looking into, as deans, they're looking into their cost centers to see where some actuals were spent as compared to a budget, so on a very high level. But they're really looking at the variance. We encourage, just like Sally does, them to use spreading as last year. So that's their behavior, their spending behavior as last year is what actually we default that to. And very few people change that because their spending is very typical. So they're really looking at their variance per month, month to date, year to date, is what they're looking at in these reports. And they look at budget versus actual. So one of the things I do like to mention, though, is, and I'm not sure we talked about this, Joanne, though, is we actually prepared a new budget after we had an original budget. So one of the nice things is that based off of tuition enrollment, we were able to easily copy one budget to the next, make adjustments in revenue and expenses by an across-the-board percentage and send it back out to them. So they not only have draft 1, but they have draft 2 as well. So it's good for them. It goes back to our transparency initiative that they can see exactly where we chose to reduce budgets by if they didn't make those decisions themselves. So.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of goes back to what, I'm sorry, Sally, go ahead.
That's I was going to say, we do that. We do different drafts when we closed the budget on this week, and we had everybody for FY19. We take that budget and we, freeze it, and they were always able to see where they left it off the last time that they were able to change the budget. We take that, we copy it, and now we start making all the changes to get to the final one, so they can always see where they were and what we've changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really is important for transparency and engagement. And I think that goes back to the terminology piece too. When we started it, we talked about what's a budget, what's a forecast, what's a projection, and what Anne, you're almost talking about, and I think you've used this term as a reforecast. So it's a budget, now you have more information, so it's like a new budget, but it's kind of a forecast. That's why terminology gets very fluid around this, and it's just important to understand what actions people are taking regardless of what they're calling things throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with you because, that was one of the nice features is that I simply had to plug in my August revenue and it reforecasted it for me, and then I created a new budget. So that's right on with what you're saying, Joanne.
Right, and we find it very important how we label those new budgets that we create in Budget Pack. If it's draft budget, if it's the final budget, or if it's the reforecast one, and make sure you're consistent year over year of what we're calling them for each fiscal year. We're right now in draft 1 budget, so everybody knows that that's not going to be the final one.
We do the same thing, and I agree with you, Sally.
Mm-hmm. The clearer you can be with what you're doing year over year, that this is the draft, the reforecast, or the final budget, the easier it's going to be for everybody.
Okay, so I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, but if folks can hang on for just a few more minutes, I think it'd be great to wrap up with the benefits that Anne and Sally you've seen. Each of you have talked about some of these, most of these in our conversations that we had prior to this call, whether it's increased engagement, more accountability, better numbers, ease of reporting and seeing trends, ability to quickly analyze the data, being agile, so reacting quickly before the problems get out of control, and higher quality due to data-driven information. So Sally, we start with you. If you could just pick maybe the top 2 or even the top 1 at this point, and give an example for how you've seen things change, that would be a great wrap up to the webinar.
Sure. I would say agility. I can take that very quickly. We dealt with that this year when we saw one trend going down, one business line. we found out, the buses where it was not internal, it was an external factor, and we were able to shift some of the funds and resources from our on-site programs to outreach programs. So we're still able to deliver our mission, but we just couldn't do it as much in the building as we did outside of the building. So agility, and I think, quality and accuracy go hand in hand, and we are very easily able to import and export information into BudgetPack from our accounting system and back out. We move really at a very fast pace, and BudgetPack makes it easy to do so.
Okay, thank you, Sally. And Anne, what would you pick? I know that Sally used your word agility, so maybe you have to pick a different one. I don't know.
So I'm going to go with combine. Now I'm just combining, so I'm going to make my own rules. Accountability and engagement, because I think that kind of, for us, that's the same thing. BudgetPack definitely set us up for a position that puts people in control. And so we have given them, that accountability, but we've also engaged them in making very difficult and very, strategic decisions for our future. So had we not had BudgetPack, I don't think they would have felt as engaged in these critical decisions that we were making. So I'm going to take both of those top two. And then analysis is one that I know we didn't mention it much, but the ability to use my Excel add-in for me has been probably saved me hours, if not weeks at times, because the ability to get that data out as I'm sitting in a meeting and to know that it's correct, that's one of the things we struggle with now, but BudgetPack formulates it in a way that you're comfortable with it. So I can get it out and report while I'm in the meeting versus researching. So I'd say those are my top two.
Okay, thank you. And just quickly, a little food for thought I'll leave our participants with. So if you're not doing a forecast, how do you know how you're doing? And can you easily answer those questions from your board or finance in a timely manner and have the data to back that up? Can you easily monitor every department down to the account level to make sure everyone is managing their business according to your strategic objectives? How do you want to engage your managers? And then what benefits would you see if they were really accountable for their numbers? And what are the key drivers of your forecast? Is it just the revenue side? Is it also the expense side? Does your current process support that? And do your managers understand where you're headed, and are they budgeting and forecasting to those goals? So we do have a number of resources on our website that are useful given today's content. We have a paper on multidisciplinary budgeting, one on employee engagement. We had done an art of forecasting webinar with a client webinar with Dan Brent from the Massachusetts School of Professional Psychology. If you may want to listen to that to learn a different approach to forecasting. And all of you on the call today will be sending you a copy of our Budgeting Accelerator series on forecasting and long-term projections, which will give you a bit about some things to look for. So unfortunately, we really don't have time for questions. If anyone has questions, feel free to send them in and we will get back to you and answer those for you. So we hope you found today's presentation useful, and thank you so much to our guest speakers, Sally Berven, the CFO of Perot Museum, and Ann Wells, the Director of Finance and Business Planning from the University of Findlay. It was a great webinar. I wish we could spend another half an hour talking because I thought it was full of practical information, and I thank you so very much for sharing your stories today. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day.